So you're telling me that tier lists are popular now, and that we can do them on literally anything? Ah shit, someone already did that and got hella views for it. Wait, why the fuck is the lock in S tier? Anyways, it's that time, people. Time for the weekly milking that I'm only going to be able to pull off one more time before entering the summer wave depression, where I despair over the fact that I can't afford 3 houses because no one watched my video on it that I put actual effort into, unlike every other 3 houses video. But before then, we got a tier list to make. Considering I literally made my name off of doing this type of stuff, I'm only A tier levels of angry that plebs now realize the beauty of the tier list. So today, we're gonna tackle one of the most welcome and inviting and not at all toxic fandoms at all, Fire Emblem. That's right, it's everyone's favorite game of which fanboy can I piss off the most. Is it the elitist? Is it the casual? Is it the baby Phoenix mode player? The answer is all of the above, as I'm about to make mountains of salt bigger than Camilla, Sonia, and Tharja's mountains combined. You probably thought that I was going to rank each of the works of Shozo Kaga separately, but I will not do that because that would defeat the point. Pitting these games against one another would serve no purpose because Kaga can do no wrong. There are no flaws in his creations, but the limitations come from the hardware or the player themselves. The player's ability to detach themselves from pointless matters like character development, personal investment, and choosing favorites will determine their enjoyment of these games because in war, there are no favorites. The ones who live are the ones RN Jesus decides to spare from the critical that day, for that is how Fire Emblem was meant to be played. Kaga made characters like Marty the most unusable pieces of garbage because life be like that sometimes, you know? Dismounting puts your superior flyers and cavaliers on the same playing field as your boring infantry units so that you can better understand the pains of war. And that is why Kaga's games cannot be rated. They are neither good nor bad, holy nor evil. They are war itself, and thusly belong in K tier, for Kaga is the beginning and the end. And that is how you talk about games you have never fucking played before. Fire Emblem Binding Blade is a wholly original Fire Emblem that is nothing like the original that features a red-haired swordsman named Roy, whose dad isn't dead. Man, we're revolutionizing Fire Emblem right away. You follow Roy and his grizzled old paladin who's way past his prime and the Christmas Cavaliers that are virtually indistinguishable in stats, so you bring both along as you don't care about the rest of your starting units like the crappy archer. You are then joined by a mercenary who was hired to protect you and is way stronger than most of the people you go against, making you wonder why he's a mercenary in the first place. But you quickly forget about that once you realize your walking vulnerary is outclassed by a vulnerary on a horse who has way better stats, and the edgy sword guy in the cool red cloak. Eventually you are reunited with the royal blue-haired love interest who displays more personality than said main lord, and is a superior unit to boot. Once you pick up a few more units that are better than the usual rabble that you have, you then challenge the main villain who has lost faith in humanity because they were betrayed, and kill the evil dragon that acts as the final boss, only to realize that none of this actually matters because Smash Bros made people care way more about Roy than this game ever did. Therefore, this game is B tier because Roy's our boy. Fire Emblem 7 is the definitive Fire Emblem game, as it has nothing but Fire Emblem with likable characters, balanced units, and a steady difficulty curve that keeps you engaged until you reach that one chapter in the endgame that makes you want to throw your handheld against the wall. I would put this game in B tier because of how average it is, as there is nothing that is truly innovative or game-breaking, since Pen only shows up at the 75% mark. This would be the standard definition of an average FE game were it not for the main lords. The main lords of FE7 are some of the most nuanced characters in all of Fire Emblem, despite having been written during a time where Edge consumed all. While these characters do have some edgy stories, how's your tribe doing, Lynn? Oh right, they're all fucking dead. They deal with said issues in realistic ways that people can relate to. That is what makes FE7 so loved. That and Lynn's existence, as there are artists dedicated to putting more Lynn into the world, and the final battle giving us jiggle physics 15 years before Warriors could, making this an easy A Sacred Stones is that one entry that exists in a vacuum from all other games, as it is the game that has absolutely no connection to any other FE whatsoever, as even Fate somehow ties back to Awakening, but don't worry, we'll get to that one. FE8 features twin lords that the game says are not romantically interested in one another, which they aren't, as Ephraim is too busy getting a hard-on from the danger he's in to realize how hard he's cock-blocking Lion. So, to gain some sort of redeeming feature, Lion tries to cure Earth Cancer with the titular object of his country, only to go batshit insane, or to be possessed by a Demon King depending on the path you choose. Since what I described is one of the biggest cases of NTR this side of Hentai Haven, praise be its return, this goes in C tier for... Several years after Super Smash Bros. Melee came out, we got a true Fire Emblem game on GameCube with Path of Radiance, a game that none of you will ever play legally because you'd rather spend that money on heroes to summon dragons, waifus, or...
the goddess herself.
Ike featured a change in writing for Fire Emblem, as the characters were personalized in ways that were not done before because intelligent systems realized, oh yeah, people can just hit the reset button whenever their units die now. So, they took painstaking efforts to make sure that the player would care if anyone other than the main lord died, and so this game goes into B tier for Brawl because, let's face it, the average Fire Emblem player never knew who this guy was until that game came out. With the Wii coming out, Fire Emblem decided to say, hey, who needs motion controls to play Fire Emblem, and gave us Radiant Dawn, a game that was supposed to be a sequel to Path of Radiance, but instead features the one bad character in Path of Radiance with a new white-haired girl named Micaiah, a unit whose usefulness is only comparable to Roy, and after you beat the game, which was only 11 chapters long for some reason, I'd say this game goes in D tier, but is that Ike? And not only that, he got a buff? Oh, then this is easy. That's an S tier for Soul. So after 10 entries into the series with Radiant Dawn failing in sales for some reason, I mean, it has buff Ike, that alone should be an easy 3 million copies. It works for Smash. However, because of the failures of Radiant Dawn, the people in charge of Fire Emblem decided to return to their roots and give us Shadow Dragon, which sits nicely in... I'm not even gonna pretend that I play this one, so I'm gonna let the dartboard decide, okay? C tier? Yeah, that's probably right. I don't fucking know. Awakening, the game that marked the end of traditional Fire Emblem and introduced us to Waifu Emblem. With this entry, S tier supports were introduced, which meant that romance now determined whether or not your units would live or die. Oh, Donnie just died to that axe fighter? That's because he didn't believe in the power of love.
I've always wanted a husband.
FBI, open up! That's right, people, for $39.99 you could play matchmaker with the units in your army, and you could also make their kids fight. The additions of these mechanics and the hundreds of supports in the game that your self-insert could have with all of them served as a great distraction from the game's painfully awful writing past the first arc, generic level design, and a horrendous level curve that's only rivaled by the original Pokemon games. This means that Awakening joins Radiant Dawn in S tier for saving the franchise. And this brings us to Fates. This one is pretty easy, so we don't need to waste time with things that don't matter, like criticisms or story analysis or character progression. No, we can just get right into it. So we know that Birthright belongs into B tier for Birthright, Conquest belongs in C tier because Camilla, Fates goes into D tier so that the thumbnail isn't clickbait, and Revelations goes into A tier for being an absolute abomination. And thus we reach the end of the current Fire Emblem chronology, and have Fire Emblem Echoes, Shadows of Valentia. This game was made to tide over Fire Emblem fans before the inevitable Switch title, and decided to look towards the second game of the series, Gaiden, and give it some time in the spotlight. Many things make Echoes a different type of beast when compared to its more traditional counterparts, and while the modern fanbase was initially wary of this game, I can safely conclude that Echoes delivers on all accounts. except a few. Echoes focuses on dual protagonists and Celica, who are refreshing takes on Fire Emblem lords, as for the first time since, well, Ike, we have characters who weren't raised as nobility, but instead as commoners. These characters and their companions are some of the best the series have ever seen, as the supporting cast has wonderful characterization, which is only emphasized by the fact that this is a fully voiced Fire Emblem game. While the story is admittedly somewhat cliche, it adds enough touches here and there that weren't in the original to keep the player engaged, because the map design sure as hell won't do that. In deciding to stay true to Gaiden, the awful map design was maintained for some reason, but so is the unique gameplay. Echoes has no weapon triangle, promotions also happen at varying levels depending on your class, and a series first in having weapons give abilities to the wielder. While none of these are traditional Fire Emblem mechanics, it actually works very naturally in Echoes and is genuinely enjoyable. Come on, 1 to 5 range archers? Those are beautiful and surprisingly not as overpowered as you might think. As you progress throughout the game, your units get more items that make them even stronger, or you get more money to upgrade your weapons with the Forge system that was horribly inflated to make people spend money on the DLC. But aside from that scummy practice, Echo stands on its own merits just fine. Great characters, especially with one of the best villains in Berkut, one of the better Fire Emblem stories, unique and interesting gameplay mechanics that are only bogged down slightly by archaic level design, and fully voiced support conversations. I cannot stress this whole full voice acting thing enough, people. Echoes is an all-around solid game that lands comfortably in A tier. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I hope you figured out that I was trolling the entire time by this point, except with the whole twist being like, oh, let's talk somewhat seriously about Echoes and give it some more screen time that it deserves. I guess screen time is not the right word for it, but you know what I mean. I am horribly tired as I am recording and uploading this, as I have been exhausted going back to my part-time job, which is just working at a Dunkin' Donuts still, but I'm on my feet all day, and since I am a kind of a unit, it's painful for me, and I'm slowly having to get used to standing for like 8 hours straight, but at least wages are going up and improving, so I'm fine on my end. I do have some online courses and other stuff I have to deal with, have to figure out how to drive and that type of stuff, so hopefully I can give you guys another video by the end of the month, but realistically I have no promises, as I'm not going to keep the whole weekly upload things. I just have too much to do, very little time to relax for myself, and I think I should just go back to the top 10 format for now. It's not like I was avoiding it or anything, it was more just I wanted to do some smaller stuff. So yeah, thank you all so much for watching. I hope to see you guys next time when I do a Fire Emblem top 10, I guess. I'll put the Persona stuff on the back burner and probably cover it another day. Well, that's all I have to say. Thanks again, and see ya!